Hey everybody, welcome to the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. Before we get started, we have a really cool guest today, Keeper Catran-Whitney. I think his story is amazing and it's a good combination of two of my professional interests. We do want to at least let you know though that we're going to be talking about some really difficult topics. We're going to be talking about trauma, abuse, sexual abuse. We just want you to be aware so that if you need to take some space for yourself, if you need to skip this episode, do what you got to do. But even if it is something that you're not a big fan of hearing or listening to, I do urge you to find a way to listen to this episode, or maybe even just read what happens, because I think it's, even if you don't want to listen to it, you can check out his book, which we'll link in the show notes. But I just wanted to let you know, and we'll talk about it again at the beginning of the episode. Thanks. Hey, welcome to the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. I'm Chris, one of your hosts, and we believe when you communicate better, you live better. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Lucie. Lucie, how are you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm pretty good. To be honest, I had to take a nap before. So my brain is fresh because I was waking up at 4 a.m. But I'm now
Yeah.
freshly recharged. Thank
I was
you.
going to
How are
say,
you
we spoke
doing?
earlier today and you were super
Yes.
tired. So I wasn't sure if you were going to make this.
So I feel much better. How are you
Good.
doing?
Yeah, so far so good. I think actually because we had that quick conversation earlier and we decided to put something off, I was able to get a lot of stuff done, which was super
Good.
helpful for me because I just have a busy
Fantastic.
day.
Yeah. So it was good for both of us.
It worked out for the best. But so today, I think I've spoken before on this podcast and to people is, I got my start as a licensed therapist, and I used to work a lot with adolescents. I used to work a lot. My specialty was problem sexual behaviors, sex offending behaviors, and with that comes a lot of complex and developmental trauma. And so in the world of what we're doing here, it's not often that those two worlds meld together, just because a lot of our conversations end up being about professional situations with some stuff personal. But so that's why I'm excited about today, is because this is where we get to blend two of my kind of professional and personal interests. And so today we have our guest Keeper. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Lucie. I too, Lucie was up at 4 a.m., but I get up at 4 a.m. just about every morning to get my workout in at 6 o'clock. So I'm
That's
ready,
awesome.
I'm energized, and I'm ready to have this conversation, this important conversation.
Do you always get up at 4 a.m.?
I do, I
That's
do.
Nice.
awesome.
I get up at 4 a.m. I have to get my workout in, and then I move about my day after I get that done. It is priority. Take care of my physical health.
Love
That's
that.
awesome.
So you and I are best friends because I get up at 5 a.m. to work out almost every day.
You're so
You
lazy, man.
guys.
You are so lazy. I've already done. How did the old commercial go in the 80s or 90s? We get more done at 4 o'clock before most of the people get done by 6 o'clock today. So come on now, 5 o'clock.
I know. I know. The both of you are up at like 4. I need to pick up my game. I'm over it.
That's
So
because we are players. We are players in the game.
But I still need
uh
my nap
you
sometimes.
yeah, you took a
Well,
nap.
I'm not going to
I'm not
say I
there
don't
yet.
want
I'm
to.
not fully there.
To be honest, I look forward to my afternoon nap. Hey, I'm
Okay,
going to
you
be
did.
66 in a couple of months, so I need my afternoon nap.
Good,
Okay,
good,
good. That
good.
makes me feel better
Yeah,
that you also
yeah,
there.
for sure.
So
At least one.
yeah, Keeper, why don't you tell the audience who you are? Tell us about your life and kind of what got you here.
All right. Once again, thanks for having me to the art and science of difficult conversations. As I was telling you too before we got on, I have done 150 interviews since March,
Wow.
and I've got another 50 to do before the end of the year. But this one in particular is one of those that really piqued my interest, just of the title, The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. So, with that said, let me share a bit about me. Before we get into it, I'm sure Lucie and Chris will agree this is going to be a very difficult topic, and it can be triggering emotionally for some people. I'm going to say we, I'm just assuming, knowing that they're from a professional outlook on all this. If you need to back up and take a step back, by all means, do so. The art and science of difficult conversations, Chris and Lucie, they will be here. You can come back to it. So with that said, my name is Keeper Catran-Whitney. I am the author of the book Helplessness, the emotional health challenges brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. Helplessness is book one of a three-book series, From Helplessness to Hopefulness to Happiness. And helplessness looks at the emotional trauma brothers experience. Not only do I look at it, but I actually tell you what happens, because what happened with me and my family is the story. And so it's from a brother's perspective. From what I understand, it's the very first book of its kind that looks at this topic purely from a brother's perspective. However, you should know going in, I have three of my sisters contribute to it after all we went through, and two of my brothers. So you do get a full family view in a sense, but and I can't believe I got them to do that after you hear the story, but you will get their perspective, which I think is incredibly valuable about what we went through. So let's jump into this. 1971, my family, we were incredibly poor. We lived in Los Angeles. We could barely eat. I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school, lived in 21 different places, homeless three times. I know what it's like to go into the streets, to look for some bottles, to turn in for somebody to get a pound of ground beef or a bag of rice. I know that story. Going to parks to get government cheese and powdered eggs and powdered milk. I know what that is like. 1971 also happened to be the year the Jackson Five were blowing up. I mean, Michael Jackson and his brothers, they were everywhere. I mean, every time you turn on the radio, you heard ABC, Who's Loving You? I Want You Back. I mean, it was everywhere. It was amazing. And every kid on the planet wanted to be like them. My mother wanted to make some extra money. As I said, we couldn't pay an $80 or $90 a month rent. So she was an amazing singer. She grew up in the gospel church. She was an amazing singer. So she got together with her brother and her sister, and they started singing. But as good as they were, they could not make enough money. So my mother would hear her eight kids, of which I am number two, four boys, four girls, and our family consists of 10, including my stepfather. We're singing around the house. Of course, we're singing Who's Loving You? I Want You Back. We're doing all of it. My mother one day said to us, well, would your kids like to sing? Because as a singing family, we could make more money. They're like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
are you
Mm-hmm.
kidding us? Emulate them. The next thing you know, the Whitney family is born, and we are singing in after-hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles. After hours means after 2 o'clock when they stop selling alcohol legally.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, yes. And so we could go into the clubs then because they needed to be selling soda and popcorn or hot dogs and stuff. So we're singing. It's amazing. One Saturday, we're rehearsing for this for an upcoming Saturday night performance, and the phone rings. My mother walks over to the phone and she's picked up the phone. Hello, who? And she looks at us and says, Michael Jackson's on the phone. Yes, soon to be King of Pop is calling our house. He wants to speak to the brother underneath me, child number four. And my brother gets on the phone and says, hello, all excited, hangs up the phone and screams, Michael Jackson said he's heard of us, says for us to keep going. We'll get there one day.
Oh.
Now, I ask you, what poor family out of South Central LA, Philadelphia, it makes no difference. Kansas City,
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, what little poor child could not dream of a better life after that? Jump cut 6 years later, 1977, we are blowing up. We're everywhere. Concerts, TV, magazine. We're with United Artists Records. We have made the coveted Billboard 100 not once, not twice, but three times that year.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we touched, Chris, Lucy, it turned to gold, baby. It was happening for us. That also happened to be the year that Motown completed their exhaustive 3 year search to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson Five, who they had lost 3 years earlier. And guess who they chose? My family of 10. We were handpicked by the woman, Suzanne DePass, who found the Jackson Five in Gary, Indiana, to be their replacement. Oh my goodness. Everything Michael Jackson called and told us to do was happening 6 years after the call.
Mm.
I like to say the bus was outside, the door was open, the engine was running, the seats were warm. All we had to do was step onto the bus, and the trajectory of our life was about to go from here to here like that. We're going to sign this contract, which is the largest new artist contract Motown offered any new group. Because where Michael Jackson was the lead singer for his brothers, we had nine. All eight of us kids could lead sing. All eight of us kids did background dance. Me and my brothers, we played instruments, and our mother was also a singer. So in their mind, we were the Jackson Five on steroids, and quite honestly, we were. There was no question about it. So we know we're going to sign this contract on our Thursday or Friday coming up. The previous Saturday, my mother and my sisters are downstairs arguing. They're doing what the girls do. It's, my sisters, they're doing something. They're going from room to room. And keep in mind, everything that we own, everything that we're driving has been, United Artists is paying for all of it.
Hmm.
The house, the car, the food, everything. So we are in debt to them by over $250,000. So, we are doing what we need to do because we couldn't do it on our own. But here are my sisters arguing, going from room to room, bathroom to bathroom, arguing about something. And every now and then I hear my mother's voice, raised voices. I'm like, okay, they're doing what they do. I have no idea. All right, fine. Shortly thereafter, my oldest sister screams upstairs, "Boys, come downstairs, family meeting." I come running downstairs. Okay, this is it. It's either Thursday or it's Friday. That's it. We are gone. We are superstars. Fame and fortune is right here.
Mm-hmm.
Motown had even created the TV show for us. I have the pilot episode in my office. It's called At Wits End. They had created this hour-long. They were throwing everything at us. Please come to us, leave United Artists, and we were going. No question about it. So I go downstairs and I walk into the living room. And as I walk into the living room, my oldest sister is pacing back and forth across the archway. She's pissed. Okay. They were arguing earlier this morning, she and my mom. And she and my mom could get into it anyway. They could be at loggerheads all the time about something. I don't know why. They just were. I would find out later, though, why. So I walk into the living room, and Lucy, what I see on the couch are my three youngest sisters seated at the far end of the couch, and they're huddled up really close to each other, and they're not saying, what the hell? We call them the baby girls. And we're like, why aren't the baby girls talking? Why aren't they saying anything? See, me and my seven brothers and sisters were 8 years apart. My mother had all eight of us in 8 years. Throw in a miscarriage in there as well. She had all eight of us by the time she was 24. So I'm looking at my youngest sisters. I'm like, why aren't the baby girls saying anything? I mean, they should be really happy. They should be really excited, but they're not. At the other end of the couch are my two youngest brothers, and they're also quiet, but they're like me. They don't know what's going on. Why aren't the girls saying anything? Why is our oldest sister so upset? We don't know. My oldest brother standing behind my three youngest sisters at the far end, and we look at each other. The two youngest, the two oldest, and the two oldest boys. We're the two oldest. We're about 16, maybe 17. I'm not quite sure. And we just kind of shrug, but we're excited. Cool, cool. So I take my seat on the couch. And within seconds, my mother and my stepfather enter. Now, we have this brown recliner in the middle of the room. It clashes violently against this green carpet. But everything that we had from a furniture standpoint, we had to go into the streets to get it. Be it couches, chairs, refrigerator, I mean, we were scouring lots just to get mattresses to sleep on. We're just trying to survive, and we are somehow doing it. But my stepfather, who's 6'6", 250 pounds, and when he wears this huge Afro wig, put his height over 7 feet tall. He sits on this brown recliner and immediately puts his face in his hands and bends over like this. And I'm thinking, is he sick? What's wrong? Okay, well, oh, maybe he's sick. I don't know. My mother walks into the living room behind him and stands next to this large window that overlooks the outside. And she turns around. Now, to know my mother, you would know she's very effervescent. She's very bubbly, incredible personality, always energetic, all the time. She's like her 8 kids. But she's not smiling. In fact, she is very stoic. She's mad. All right, this is not shaping up what I thought it was going to be. This is not the meeting I'm expecting. Something's wrong. Chris, I believe you and I talked about this prior. There are earthquakes. And I live in Southern California. We get earthquakes all the time. They're material in nature. They crack freeways, they uproot trees, they houses do all this racking back and forth. Those are material, and they can be put back together with a little rebar, little concrete, little spit, little glue, little gum, pop, 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 get back on the freeway, go back in the house, mow the lawn. Not a problem. Emotional earthquakes, that's a different matter altogether. If it's an emotional earthquake and it hits you, it's almost impossible to come back completely. At best, you try to manage it so you can move forward. I don't know what's going on. None of us boys know what's going on, but we are about to find out. We are about to be hit with 10 emotional earthquakes. Excuse me, 3 emotional earthquakes. 3 in a 10-minute span. So we're looking at our mother, waiting for her to tell us about the Motown deal. She opens her mouth and delivers earthquake number 1. Your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years. What? Wait a minute. What did you say? Who's been doing what? I'm a brother. I am knocked backward. Shock and disbelief is washing over me. I'm slow on the uptake because as she's talking, I'm not catching every word, but what I hear is liquor store, park, and apartment. Wait a minute, I am so off balance. And then she delivers earthquake number 2. She says, I have known all along. No, you've known what all along? And I don't know what to do. I'm emotionally paralyzed. I am physically paralyzed. I am angry. I'm feeling so many different things in this moment. And then earthquake number 3 rumbles through the house and breaks the entire thing apart. My oldest sister, who's pacing back and forth, she's the 3rd oldest and the oldest girl. She and I are 11 months apart. She spins around and points a finger at her 4 innocent brothers and says, you can't talk It didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever. And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that were so incredibly tight lay on the living room floor broken. What I do with my book and in my talks, I look to elevate the voices of brothers, to bring us into a conversation of which we are not allowed. We are told you can't participate, but you must answer for your lack of participation. And that is what happened to me and my brothers by our sister. From a trauma standpoint, the people that could help us begin to get some semblance of understanding, could answer something for us, could tell us what has been going on, our sisters just told us we want nothing to do. Don't even bring it to us. You must deal with this on your own, even though you are completely innocent. You don't understand any of it, but leave us alone. And this is so common for brothers and men who learn about these sorts of things with our sisters because we're not allowed to participate. And I look to talk about the challenges brothers have because what happens is when the exposure happens, there's conversations for the predator. There's often conversations for the people who empower the predator, in this instance, my mother. And there's definitely conversations or conversations that are allowed by my sister. And if you're going to heal the whole family, you've got to close the loop on everything. You cannot ask the brothers to stand over there and be quiet because we are treated as taboo or as an inconvenient truth. And the truth is, everyone knows that we know, but we can't participate. Even as shame and anger and betrayal and guilt and confusion and all sorts of crises from isolation to depression just overwhelm us. I didn't know at that time what PTSD was, but I was in the throes of it big time. And so were my three brothers, and so were my sisters. You know, I understand why my older sister said what she said. She's protecting herself and she's protecting her three younger sisters. I get it. It took me a while because I know that I needed to talk. I needed to speak because in 77, there were no books, there were no articles, there were no documentaries, there were no movies, there were no 12-step programs. There wasn't even a one-step program. And the same thing exists today. When it comes to brothers, we are left out of the conversation. And so we carry all this pain and this trauma in silence. And no one ever asked us, ever, are you okay? Do you need to talk? Is there anything you need? I know it didn't happen to you directly, but indirectly you have been impacted because even though it happened to your sister directly, it happened to all of you. You boys just didn't know it. And for me and my brothers, it went a long way toward explaining why my sisters would react to us if we asked a certain thing or if we did a certain thing, or why when we were singing, they did not want to stand on the side where my stepfather was, who eventually ended up playing bass. They didn't want to go down there. We'd be like, but you got to go down there. This is how we set up. And sometimes they're like, I'm not going down there. I'm not standing in front of him. I'm like, why? What's the problem? And so we have to shuffle everything. And there's just so many instances like that. We would go somewhere and like, I'm not sitting next to him. Or I'm not sitting next to mom. It's like, how come?
It's such a powerful story, Keeper, and I'm appreciative of you being able to share it. I'm wondering, what's your journey after that point to even get to the point where you're able to start talking about it yourself?
It was incredibly difficult because after we learned of it, my mother and my stepfather, he immediately faked a heart attack to get him out of the room, to get him away, because I'm certain they started to figure, okay, if too much time passes by, the boys are going to figure out we need to do something to him and it's not going to be pretty. So they immediately extricated themselves from the situation, leaving us 8 kids all by ourselves in silence. So within 5 minutes, we finally I remember just standing up and going to my bedroom, and I was so scared because I'm going upstairs and I'm shaking, but I know I do not want to be alone, but that's the only place I could go. Because in the bedroom, in the immediate aftermath, Chris, is so much crisis and confusion. The psychological and emotional toll really hadn't hit yet, because at this point everything is just total shock, shock,
Mm-hmm.
shock. I remember a few years ago the term shock and awe was a big thing,
Yeah.
and it was shock and awe. And so I had to go to my bedroom, and I just remember sitting in there scared, because it was like being in the middle of a maelstrom out in the ocean, this whirlpool, and I'm just being surrounded by this white shark just ready to pull me down emotionally. And it wasn't going to take much. I mean, I was already drowning emotionally. So I had to figure out a way to physically move forward. Because at that point, it wasn't even about the emotional moving forward. I had to physically figure out a way to get up and do things, even in the midst of all trying to figure out what to do. And as I said, knowing the people that I need to speak to the most, my sisters, wanted nothing to do with me. So, you're going through these protective instincts, and yet you're told don't do anything. And what my sister said really is what locked me in my brother's death, because we dare not talk to them. At this point, we are hanging by a thread. And to enter into or attempt to enter into a conversation with them would have been snip, you're done. And I'm floating out in this emotional galaxy alone, just, I don't know what to do. How do I get back to them? How do I get back to my brothers? Because I violated the very law they said don't do, but my only way through is to violate the law.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way. And it took me years to find the courage to do it. And there were woulda, coulda, shoulda moments. As I said, let me just back up. We are with United Artists. We still have to continue singing. We still have to figure out a way to continue singing together. And
Mm-hmm.
each time we're doing this, we know there's so much emotional betrayal taking place.
Yeah.
And yet we all realize, okay, we have to keep going because we have to eat. But no one wants to be together. But we are legally and contractually bound to do so. And this is our way of keeping a roof over our head. The challenge with the music made everything that much more difficult. Because if it wasn't for the music, we easily could have just splintered off and gone our own direction, like so many families do. I mean, they just shut each other
Sure.
out. We
Sure.
could not do that. And so we had to figure out a way to keep going. And the trying to regulate myself emotionally, knowing that I want to ask him, or if we're at, we're still trying to do a holiday here and there, but we would hear from our sisters, didn't hear me crying. How could you not see me weeping? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
but that was baked into the whole thing. We weren't supposed to. And so, how do you bring brothers once they learn into the conversation where everyone can be safe? Everyone can feel that their needs are met emotionally and being heard. How do you do that? And my experience talks about the only way through it is to go through it. There's a great book out by Dr. Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's the solution. You've got to talk. And so um, it took years, and you go through so many things. You go through emotional trauma, which is why my book is called The Emotional Challenges Brothers Have, as opposed to the mental, because the mental is what comes after the emotional. I have this view of mental challenges versus emotional challenges. See, I think most people have mental challenges get there because their emotional challenges weren't met initially. When you're in trauma and you're in pain, it's an emotional reaction. You're angry, you're sad, you're disappointed. It's emotional. And when you can't get that met from an emotional standpoint, because emotional support is community-based, it's shared experience,
Yeah.
it's feelings, and how many people want to share their feelings with somebody else. So we're told, go stand in the corner, be by yourself, which is like what my sisters did. Go stand in the corner, be by yourself, and figure it out. When you can't get that need met, you go to the mental
Mm.
up here. And when you're in emotional trauma, that's the last place you need to be because you go to a place of logic. It took me years to figure this out. It's not emotional, but it's not mental that I'm dealing with. Yeah, I literally it was maybe 3 years ago that I finally figured it out. I'm not dealing with mental, I'm dealing with emotional. And because my emotional wasn't met, I went to a very dark place, which becomes logic.
Mm.
It becomes I need to figure out I got to do this, this, this. There is no other way. There is no other answer. I'm alone. I'm in isolation. And after 9 years of going by, I went to a very, very dark mental place where I almost killed. Murder is a better word, it's a more accurate word, where I almost murdered my stepfather.
Mm.
I can even tell that it's there's a lot of pain, a lot of other emotions, anger, um, depression, upset, isolation. And so a lot of feelings. And you're saying, because the emotional needs didn't get met, these were the consequences. And it wasn't pretty. It was really hard and really painful. What do you wish people told you at that time instead of saying, don't speak about this?
I wish I was invited into the conversation and understand I get it. I'm not
Mm,
discounting anything that my sister said. I know why she did that. She had to. This was her chance to protect herself,
mm,
to put a protective shield over her and my three youngest sisters.
yeah.
But I wish we were giving the opportunity to ask what happened. Because at least at that point, there would be some sort of understanding. But when we're not allowed to ask, what is taken from us is our only chance for healing. That's where it starts with us because we can't do it on our own. We don't know enough to say, well, I need to do this, I need to do that. And even if we did, we would still need to have questions asked. See, when it comes to your family, they're the most important people that you know. As time went by, it was this loss of my family that became very, very prevalent. I had lost it because everything I thought
Mm.
we were, everything about us is a lie. Nothing about us is true. Well, that's not the case because the fun times that we had, those were real. The love that we
Mm.
shared with my sisters, that was real. It's just that in that moment, you think because the trauma is so debilitating
Yeah.
that you're alone, that you're isolated, and no one could possibly understand or feel what you're feeling. And so, Lucie, what you want to do, you want to find someone that you can talk to, but that's very difficult, certainly at my age. And
Makes
one
sense.
of the things that happened was my older sister, after telling everyone that we couldn't talk, she went out and started talking and telling
Mm.
her friends. So she found an outlet for herself, but everyone else, particularly me and my brothers, we were locked down.
Mm,
And so you don't want, and certainly for us, you didn't want the stigma, right?
Mm.
Uh, Everyone finds out about your family. And that's probably the first line of defense I think that happens for most people when it comes to trauma. You don't want anyone else to know because you want to
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
people want to know that you got your stuff together.
mm,
We're all doing the best we can. I don't care who you are. I don't care if your situation is, you are doing the best you can. There's a phrase that I heard that for me is absolutely true. And it's about the messenger of misery. The messenger of misery has either just left your house or is on the way to your house or is at your house right now. And that's it for everyone because there's always going to be something. There's always something coming or something that just left that you just overcome.
Mm.
So, brothers, our messenger of misery lived with us for 45 years because we were carrying this burden in silence, and it made it very, very difficult to do things because I found myself easily imagining what he was doing to my sister. It
Mm.
was very vivid.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, Helplessness, I describe it and what I imagined him doing. And I talked to my sisters afterward about what I wrote. And I said, I imagine him taking you in a closet and closing the door in the dark, and you're on the floor. And the next thing you hear is a zipper coming down. And you just hear the pants hit the floor. And then he has his way with you. And the one sister that I said, this is what I imagined, she said, you got it exactly right.
Mm.
It's one thing to not be involved into the conversation, but then when we start imagining what has happened to them, it takes on a life of its own. It really does. And so we need tools and systems that allow us to talk, that allow us to express what we're dealing with. So, because there's just so much.
As you got older, who was instrumental for you to talk to that you were able to start
Mhm.
sharing this stuff with?
When I decided to write Helplessness, which was in 2013, it took me 10 years to write it because it was so incredibly difficult. Luckily, hopefulness and happiness won't be as difficult because hopefulness is how do you get from this helplessness place and find hope. And so I'm decided I want to write this book, but I know I've got to tell my sisters. They're like, okay, I'm doing this because I need to do this for me, and I need to let other brothers know they're not alone. So I called one of my sisters, in fact, the second sister, and I said, look, I need to come over. I need to talk to you about something. I'm going to write a book. And she said, okay, come on over. And so we're standing out in front of her garage. And I told her, I'm going to write this book about what it's like for brothers because there's nothing out there for us. There are no resources. There's no counseling specific to brothers. And I'm waiting for her to get so angry and tell me, how dare you? Don't you ever do that. It didn't happen to you boys. But what I got was something different. And this, I think, Lucy, you asked, or maybe Chris, this is some 45 years later that I'm finally talking about this because my brothers and I,
Mm.
we didn't even talk about it amongst ourselves. That's
Mm.
how scared we were. Like, oh my God, we need to talk to each other
Yeah.
about it. And so I'm telling her, and what she says to me is, of course you should write a book. All you boys should write a book. It's not a girl story, it's a boy story. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You just said we couldn't talk to you guys. That's why we never came to you. But time has a way of bringing perspective and evolution to
Mm.
situations. It has a way of reshaping things because we would still see each other from time to time on a holiday or something, and yet we still get the little whispers. But when I told her I was going to write this book, her response was love. It was great. I'm like, wow. And I'm telling her I'm a mess in front of the garage. And then I know the next day I've got to call my oldest sister, the one who said, do not talk to us about it. And I'm so scared. It took me 3 days to eventually call her, but she ultimately, when I told her what I wanted to do, and I know that was definitely the person who I'm ready for the wrath of hell to come and just follow me up and pull me down. She said, okay. What do
Mm.
you mean, okay? What are you talking about? And
Yeah.
the story is you've got to find a way to get there. I'm writing a section in the book, and this was the second thing that was pretty instrumental. I'm writing a section in the book, and one night I'm in the bed and I'm telling my wife about it. And I'm saying, this is what's going on. And she's looking at me and she's not saying a word. And then eventually she says, you're a victim. And I said, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? Of course you're a victim. Look at you. You're a mess. I'm just telling you what I'm writing in this section and how difficult it is. And she says, you're crying, you're sweating, you're shaking. How can you not know you're a victim? All you boys are victims. And it was like, what? I'm a victim? And that's part of the challenge for brothers too, because as men, we're not taught to be vulnerable, to accept that part of us that we could be weak like that. So the next day I get up and I Google, okay, could I be a victim of sexual abuse? And then I remember, oh, let me ask this too. Let me Google this part too. Because 6 years before my sisters in 1965, my older brother and I, we were sexually abused by our babysitter almost daily for 6 months. That never occurred to me at 57 years old that that was sexual abuse until my wife said what she said the previous night. And I'm looking at it. I'm a sexual abuse survivor. That was sexual abuse. Well, of course it was, but it never clicked.
Mm.
I never accepted, and that's job one, accepting that you are a victim. Because without that acceptance, the opportunity for healing is nearly impossible. And that's one of the things that can make it so hard for men. We have to accept not only that we can be hurt and that we are hurt, but knowing that it's okay to feel that, to be that, to embrace it. Because I look at it like this, Chris and Lucy, to me, it's like DNA.
Mm.
Trauma is like DNA. And DNA self-replicates throughout the body all the time, all day, every day, and in ways we don't even know about. I mean, you don't even know what's going on, but it's the DNA. It's just doing what it's doing. Trauma is the same way. It replicates throughout you, and
Mm.
usually in ways you don't even recognize,
Mm.
especially for men. Women have such a much better handle on this, and that's and so I'm not recognizing that relationships I'm having with my sisters or other women is being impacted by the trauma that I'm experiencing, knowing that my sisters were sexually abused. Conversations that I'm having, or a reaction that a woman may have in a conversation, I'm like, why is that such a big deal? I don't understand it, but I don't know because I haven't been able to have the conversation. I haven't been able to have someone sit down with me and not just give me noise. See, most people
Mm.
when they talk to you, they give you noise. They won't shut up. Their opinions may be valid, their opinions may be okay, but at that time, that's not what you need. You just need someone to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's job two. Number one is accepting what has happened to you, that you're in pain, that you're in trauma. And that next, you need to find someone to talk to who won't just judge you, who just listen and let you just pour out. And it may take multiple conversations. And after a while, you get into a rhythm and you find out, okay, I can trust this person to let me be me and let me be vulnerable. But because of toxic masculinity that has really become a subject these days, it's so
Mm.
hard for me. And I know I figured out that was my only salvation, talking. And my big talking was through the book. It really has been the thing. And I've learned so much about me because my view was I do not want my family's tragedy or experience to end in tragedy. That is not going to be it. We are not going to go out like that. Granted, I thought we were going to be delivering great music, but to me, our reason for coming together as 10 people was not music, not even close. I thought it was. It was this. It
Mm.
was for us to go through this as ugly and difficult as it was so that I could bring a conversation to the world that had not been had before and help other brothers and men understand they're not alone.
So sounds like you're really seeing what kind of gift, no matter how painful, how difficult, how traumatic that experience been, how
Yeah,
can I turn that into a gift, into
yeah,
something that I can gift to other people and make their lives better and help them process their emotions and trauma.
that's really it. You know, if you can get there and embrace what has happened to you and understand, it's a part of me.
Mm.
I'm not going to run from it. Can I use it to help other people? And not everyone can do that. I get it. But oftentimes people need other people's trauma so that they can live through your pain to help them get through their pain, or at
Mm.
least get a grasp of it. And so I just felt that other brothers and sisters will live through what we experience. And it has happened. Brothers have gone back to their sisters. Sisters have gone to their brothers after reading what my sister wrote, said, I had no idea. I should have let you talk. I should have, we should have had these conversations. None was more evident to me than 4 years ago. My father-in-law is 95 years old, or he was. We are very different. He's white. He's Jewish. He grew up in Brooklyn. He
Mm.
grew up in a middle class family. He grew up very stable. He graduated from college. I'm on the West Coast. I'm Black. I'm kind of Baptist, I guess, but I'm more on the spiritual side of things.
Sure.
I'm poor. I grew up, you heard about it. And what keeps us, our common thread is my wife, his daughter. So one day, 4 years ago, he calls me and he says, I want you to come to the house, because to me, this crosses race, religion, politics, education, wealth. It crosses everything. There is no singular group that this issue is for. It is global, what I'm talking about. It happens all the time. It's an epidemic. So he says, I want you to come to the house. I want to talk to you about something. And I said, okay, Dad, I'll be over in a few minutes. So I hop in the car. He's about 10 minutes away. He and my mother-in-law, and I go to the house and I walk in and I notice something immediately. And that's that my mother-in-law is not there, which is really odd because they're together
Mm.
all the time. I mean, they are like this. They married 78 years or something like that. 72.
Mm.
I mean, they're together all the time, but she's not there. So he says, come over, have a seat here at the dining room table. I want to talk to you. And I said, all right. I go sit down and I said, Dad, is everything okay? And all he says is, I understand. You understand what? And he starts patting a book in front of him. And I look down. It's my book. And he says, I understand. And he starts to cry. Like, is everything okay? I'm thinking, are you mad at me? Did I say something wrong?
Mm.
Did I do something? And he just said, I just want you to know I understand. He says, I'm going to tell you something you can't tell anyone until after I pass away. Okay. The only person who knows this story is your mother-in-law. I haven't even told your wife, my daughter, or my two other daughters. You can't tell anybody. When I was a little boy in Brooklyn, about 16 or 17, we lived in a two-story apartment. We were downstairs. Our best friends were upstairs. We were so close as families that we never locked our doors. We could go in and out of each other's apartment all day, 24 hours a day, 65 days a week. It made no difference. And so I'm okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
One day, my mother and my father, I don't remember which one, sends me upstairs to get something. I don't know, milk, eggs, I have no idea, but I go upstairs. I go into the apartment and I don't see anybody. So I'm just looking around and my father-in-law is starting to full on cry. So as I'm standing there, I hear a sound come from the bed and I walk over and I open the door. And the father is molesting my sister. I just stood there and I did nothing. I went back downstairs and I didn't say anything. I didn't say a word to my mother, a word to my father. My sister came downstairs. We looked at each other. We didn't say anything. And yet she knows I saw her because she looked at me while she was on the bed being, yeah. I didn't say a word. And he's just crying. He's
Mm.
95 years old. And then he says it happened again 2 months later. And I still didn't say a word. I want you to know I understand. I understand what you've written. And it hit me just how big this is because he's 95 years old. He knows he's dying. He doesn't need to say a word to anybody. He's a successful businessman. He has a great family. And yet here he is at 95 telling me I am in pain. I'm still in trauma. I want you to hear me. I need someone to understand. I need someone to tell me it's okay.
Mm.
He's been carrying this for almost 80 years. And on his way out, he is saying, someone listen to me. Someone hear me. I need to say this. He's been carrying this burden for so long. And what struck me, Lucie and Chris, is of his three son-in-laws, he did not tell his white Jewish son-in-law. He didn't share that with him. He didn't share it with his white Greek Catholic Orthodox son-in-law. He shared it with his black son-in-law, who grew up completely different than him. Granted, it's my book, and that's where the common bond is.
Mm-hmm.
But he did not want the stigma once his nieces,
Mm.
nephews, grandchildren knowing, which is why he said, you can't tell anyone until I pass away. And it is the trauma around this that brothers, as I say, carry in silence. He carried this for 80 years, and I've come to learn so many more men carry this in silence. And that's why I say it crosses race, it crosses religion, it crosses politics, it crosses social
Yeah.
economics, it crosses wealth, it crosses education, it crosses waters, it's in every country on the planet. And we have to somehow bring the voices of brothers into the
Mm.
conversation. That's our only way out.
What would you say to people who are hearing stories like this? You know, because not everybody's a therapist, so they're not going to know what to do with this when somebody's like sharing this.
Right.
And um, what would be helpful like for your from your perspective, if somebody's lived through it? What would have been helpful for somebody when they're hearing that story?
What is helpful, and I'm like I said, I've spoken to a number of men, and what is universal is we want someone to hear us. First of all, we want to be able to talk to our sisters if that's possible, and understanding that our sisters are carrying a lot. Not very many brothers have my point of view, which is the direct victim at 7 years old of sexual abuse and an indirect victim knowing what happened to my sister. That doesn't happen to a lot. It's usually one or the other. And so what other men have all told me, I just want to be able to ask my sisters. I just want to be able to talk. But if I can't even get that, I need to find someone or a community that I can talk to that would
Mm.
allow me to just unburden myself because I'm feeling so much anger and betrayal and shame on my part because I'm thinking that I should have been able to protect him even though I knew nothing about it, but that's irrelevant. I'm an
Mhm.
older brother. And for me, just by definition, what it means to be a brother who has sisters is to protect their honor. If we can't do that, we feel such a loss of self esteem, such a loss of self worth. So, what we want to do to answer your question is we have to find someone that we can talk to. I've spoken to a number of therapists about my situation as I was writing the book. And I said, I just want to talk to you about this. And to a person, they told me they could not talk to me. And my response is, why?
Mm.
And their response has been universal. I don't know what to do with brothers in this situation. I've never
Mm.
heard of anything like this. If you were a woman, I could tell you all sorts of steps to take. But but if you're talking about you as a sexual abuse victim, I could tell you what to do for a man in sexual abuse. But from a brother standpoint, that's very different. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to process that. How am I supposed to come at that?
Mm.
So even today, there are no tools or systems for brothers. We are completely left out of the loop.
Mm.
We've got to find someone to talk to. That is job one. And it may be a professional clinical. It could be a family therapist. It could be a psychologist. It could be any number of people. They're out there. Chris, this is your area. You may want to expand and learn a little bit more about this, but you're the type of resource that someone like I could have gone to, but didn't have available to me.
It seems like the communication in a way is, and the difficult conversations is like a healing tool.
No question about it. No, when I finally found the courage to go to my sisters, and like I said, I'm expecting all hell to break loose.
Mm.
And what I got was, it's okay. The shackles of what was holding me back just melted away. I felt
Mm.
empowered. I felt my self-esteem rush in. I felt my self-worth rush in. I felt that I was now going to be the brother that they needed,
Mm.
and which allowed me to take the steps years later to actually bring them closure
Mm.
in 2021, as I'm finishing up the book, to find my stepfather and do the necessary that was required for my sisters to give them their closure. Because part of the challenge for brothers is we still want to do something.
Mm.
And if you can't, and that's not always possible. You don't always have that opportunity like I had. Mine just fell into my lap, but I just knew my book could not end until I did that. But we want to bring some sort of closure or bring something for our sisters, because in doing that, that brings us closure. And it
Mm.
could be just the conversation, getting that
Yeah.
started, which is very difficult. How do you bring brothers and sisters together? Even though you may see each other at a family event or go to the movies or talk, you know, you're still just barely hanging on. All it takes is
Yep.
one memory or one conversation. And like I said, that thread is cut and you guys never see each other again. And it becomes generational, by the way.
Yep.
And what I mean by that, I've got children, and if they have children, and if I no longer see my sister, it means I'm no longer seeing my nieces and nephews, and my nieces and nephews are no longer communication. They're no longer communicating, communicating, and it just goes down. The whole generational trauma
Yep.
Mm.
goes forever. And I decided I am not going to keep my children away from their aunts. I have to take the steps. I have to talk to them. I absolutely must make the effort over and over and over again until we find a spot, that sweet spot that says, okay, I will listen. And then, the healing has a chance. Doesn't mean it's always going to
Mm.
happen, but you just need the chance. And for me, I'm really incredibly lucky that three of my four sisters gave me the chance. One I
Mm.
do not talk to over this still. And in fact, my two youngest brothers, I have no communication with because of this.
Mm.
The trauma is running too deep. And
Ouch.
some trauma is just too deep for the healing. It really is for some people.
It's powerful. I wish we had like a ton more time to talk. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for like 3 hours
For
and
sure.
still like not scratch the surface.
Mm.
But if somebody were to, what are 1 to 2 takeaways you would have for somebody that's listening to this?
The first takeaway, if you're a brother, I'll give a takeaway from a brother's perspective and from a sister's perspective, is
Hmm.
from a brother's perspective, embrace what you're dealing with. Don't push it away. That's the worst thing you can do, because once again you're going to that mental place and you're making excuses as to why you can't take the necessary steps. No, 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 no. Do the best you can to embrace what has happened to you. Because once you do that, then you're on the path. Then you can seek out someone like you, Chris. Otherwise, like I said, it took me decades. I just wasn't going to do it because I wasn't taught to do it. Today we're being taught more and more, particularly as men, to do it. So embrace it, hold your ground. You are okay. You're not alone. Trust me. If my story, my father's long story didn't do it for you, understand that you're not alone. For women, for girls, I understand you control the narrative because of what men have done historically to women over the beginning of time. So I understand that you control the narrative, but the narrative needs to make room for innocent men, to step into the conversation. Because what that does for you, that creates understanding, that creates dialogue, that creates tolerance, that creates so many opportunities to make all of us better. And if you really are sincere about your own healing, this is for men and women, the conversation needs to take place, at least the opportunity to do so. So if one of the things that my sisters inadvertently did, they made their brothers guilty through gender proximity. And it took me a while to get it.
Mm.
Your brothers aren't guilty. They are victims and they're trying to survive. We're really trying to find a way to you, but you got to give us an opening. And that, I get it. It's not difficult. Whether it is, it's not easy. But for sisters, if you can put yourself in your brother's shoes and just imagine what we are going through in silence, and how would you like to, if you were a brother, come to you and figure out a way, because we're all different. How do you figure out a way to allow them to come in and just talk? Sometimes that requires having an initial conversation with some of the resources that we spoke of earlier, to help you
Mm-hmm.
find the strength, and help you find the resolve that you need. One of the things that I really like about my story, just so people understand, I have great relationships with three of my sisters now. I never thought it was possible until 10 years
Yeah.
ago. Never thought it was possible, but because I took the steps. And so now my family story, as difficult as helpless as can be, but we go from hope, we go to happiness together. It is a story of hope. It is a story of resilience. It is a story of survivorship. It is a story of triumph,
Mm-hmm.
you know, individually, collectively, as a family. It is. I don't talk to my mother. I don't talk to my stepfather, obviously, but the people I need, the triumph is there. Those are my three sisters, and they uh, we've been able to. We have so much fun on the daily now. It's
Mm-hmm.
text messaging, it's jokes flying back and forth, and yet we all understand where we are with this. And from time to time, we do have those conversations. But it is a story of thrivership. That's what I like to say. We are thriving now.
Keeper, I really appreciate your, I think I'm humbled and honored that you're willing to share your story with us. So I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm just trying to, every day my goal is never forget I am the voice for so many brothers who don't have a voice. That's my thing. I am the voice right now. And I'm looking to bring more voices in the conversation so it grows. Every, as I said, my father-in-law is a great example of that.
Mm.
He wanted a voice. So I'm happy to share this story um, and explore the possibilities of how we get there.
Sounds like your book can give not only healing for many people and families by realizing they're not alone in that struggle, and that's a natural part of that everybody in that family in a way is suffering in their own way. Opens the space for empathy, not just for the women, but also for other members of the family, brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and gives them courage to share perhaps with others too.
Speaking of courage, not everyone gives me the opportunity to speak. For some people, it's very difficult for me to talk
Yeah.
about what I talk about, even though I'm doing these podcasts all the time. But there are those people, it's just too triggering for them. And I want to say, from a courage standpoint, the two of you allowing me to talk about this and have some conversation about it, I am greatly appreciative of that, because it allows people, oftentimes it's that aha moment. Oh,
Mhm.
I had no idea. Because oftentimes when I speak, there's invariably a woman who will say, well, your sisters are right. It didn't happen to you.
Mm.
I usually say, well, it did, because I'm a brother. And so
Yeah,
just from a
your
collateral
impact.
standpoint, it happens to me. But it's usually not until I tell them I was sexually abused 6 years before my sisters. And then the woman normally says, oh, I didn't know. And my response is, you shouldn't have to know.
Mm-hmm.
There shouldn't be this battle of whose trauma is worse. I'm a woman, I'm a sister, you're a brother, you're a man, ours is worse. Well, it's worse from the standpoint that it no doubt has happened more to women. That doesn't lessen my trauma or a brother's trauma, but that's usually what happens. And so by having these conversations with the two of you, Chris and Lucy, it hopefully gives people their aha moment. Oh, I never looked at it like that. I have never thought about the brothers. And that's
Mm.
usually what happens.
If people want to follow you, they want to get your book, how's the best place for them to follow you and keep up with you?
Well, they can always go to my website, certainly at keepercatran-whitney.com. They can get the book on Amazon. If they want to contact me directly, it's keepercw.author@gmail, or they can come to you. You know exactly how to put them in touch with me, and you are a fantastic resource. The work that the two of you do, I'm trying to remember the podcast you just uploaded. I think it was 2 days ago. Uh, man, I forget the title of it. Um, but your episodes are so impactful. They are
Mm.
incredibly powerful conversations that you have with people, and it's all about expanding the conversation, regardless of how difficult it is, which is why it's called the art and science of difficult conversations. You do that in an amazing way. So if people want to reach me, you are a fantastic resource, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks again for being here.
Thank you. We appreciate you and your courage and vulnerability and generosity with sharing and allowing others to receive the benefits and healing from that. Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, all, you just saw the conversation we had with Keeper, and it was a really impactful story. Again, this is stuff I've done for a long time, hearing those kind of stories and talking with people like that. And I always think of it as a privilege that I'm able to hear stories like that. And that is a privilege for you to hear these stories because it takes a lot of courage. So I encourage you to learn more about Keeper. If you want to learn more about his story, keep up with him. We'll keep it in I'll put it in the show notes below. But also, I also want to provide some resources. If someone else you know is going through a situation like that of abuse, of trauma, or you just know about something, or you just want to get something off your chest, you want to talk to somebody, you don't necessarily talk to me because I'm not your therapist, but I encourage you. I'll put some resources down below. There are lots of people out there. There's lots of resources for you to find people and talk to and chat with, even if you're not comfortable with therapy quite yet. But I do encourage you, as Keeper was saying, as we always say in this podcast, talking about it, being open, it really helps out a lot more than you would think. So please consider getting support if you need to. Otherwise, we'll see you next week's episode. See you next week.